A group of elderly men gather each morning at a cafe. They drink their coffee and sit for hours discussing the concerns they have about the world's situation. They do this every morning for months, for years. Oh, there is always something to talk about and worry about and feel anxious about. And the three friends are often kvetching and wringing their hands and agitated during these daily talks. Given the state of the world, you can imagine that these talks are usually depressing. One day, one of the men surprises his friends by suddenly announcing, "You know what? I'm an optimist." The others are shocked. This is news after all this time. But after pausing to think for a moment, one of them says, "Wait a minute, if you're an optimist, why do you look so worried still?" And he responds, "What, you think it's easy to be an optimist?" On any day, even on a good day, there is so much to worry about in our world. We could just as easily be the ones gathered in that cafe shrine gevalt day after day. Fragmentation plagues American society. Each day we turn on the news and gain a new layer of concern for something happening in our world. This has been the case for a long, long time, and with the election less than a month away, the tension is only increasing. And now, as we sit more than a year since October 7th, not only is it not easy to be an optimist, it feels downright impossible sometimes. More than 100 hostages remain in captivity in Gaza. Hamas and other Iran-backed terror groups continue to use precious, holy human lives as shields, including children. Tens of thousands of Israelis continue to be displaced as rockets fly toward Israel, and sirens telling everyone to find shelter are simply a fact of life. Protesters on college campuses and around the world march in support of terrorism and so-called resistance by any means, calling for an intifada now, many without being able to point to Israel on a map or accurately identify her neighbors, without knowing anything of the history of Israel's founding or wars or society. And far too many of us have experienced the deafening silence of our friends, or those we believed were our friends, before this terrible year. We have witnessed greater anti-Semitism than many of us had thought possible in this day and age, than many of us had previously experienced in our lifetime. Oh, it is hard indeed to be an optimist today. We are heartsick. We are exhausted. We are afraid. Oftentimes in recent months, it's felt like we are hanging on by a thread. Interestingly, the origin of the Hebrew word for hope, tikvah, comes to us from a lesser-known story in Tanakh. The word tikvah relates to the word kav, which means line or thread. My colleague, Rabbi Amanda Green, teaches that the origin of this word comes from the story of a specific incident as the Israelites are prepared to enter the Promised Land. Moses has passed the mantle of leadership to Joshua, who sends 2 spies to scout the city of Jericho. Upon entering, the spies stay at the home of a harlot named Rachav, who dwells in the walls of the city. When the Canaanites get wind that 2 enemy Israelites are staying in Rachav's home, they plan to attack. Rachav warns the Israelite spies and protects them, saving their lives and enabling them to escape. In gratitude, the spies promise Rachav that when the Israelite army invades Canaan, they will repay the favor by protecting her and her family. To do so, they offer her a scarlet tikvah, a scarlet thread, to hang from her window to identify her and her family as friends, not foes. This thread, tikvah, is the only promise Rachav has that her family will be unharmed. Hope, Tikva is the scarlet thread we hang on to in times of trouble and fear, saving us time and time again, binding one generation to the next throughout our history. And even when it feels thin and frayed, we cling to that thread of hope, holding fast to it even through tragedy and persecution. Af al pi chen, despite it all, in every land, in every age, the Jewish people has demonstrated an ability not only to imagine a reality different, at times radically different than the one we are experiencing, but to work to make it so. This goes far beyond the question of optimism with which we began. Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, the former chief rabbi of the United Kingdom, taught, "It needs no courage, just a certain naivety, to be an optimist. It needs a great deal of courage to have hope. No Jew, knowing what we do about history and our own past, so often written in tears, can be an optimist. But no Jew who is a true Jew can ever give up hope." Imagine back with me to the story of the Exodus, when our ancestors were enslaved in Egypt generation after generation for more than 400 years. No one remembered a time before slavery. It was all they knew. Even when this new leader, Moses, grew more prominent, they didn't dare to dream. Plague after plague swept through Egypt, and Pharaoh repeatedly reneged on his word and refused to let the Israelites go. Finally, the word came that they would be leaving, and they had only one night to prepare. Midrash teaches that on that night, Miriam went from home to home, offering reassurance and reminding the women to bring their timbrels. "When we reach freedom," she told them, "we will rejoice. We will thank God and we will dance. You will need your timbrels." I imagine the women saying in reply, "Of all the things, you want us to schlep around those heavy drums?" And Miriam would reply, "It will be worth it. Trust me, you will have cause to rejoice." Miriam, of course, was right. They crossed the sea and witnessed the ghastly scene of Pharaoh's horsemen and chariots being engulfed as the sea closed around them. When it was over, the women uncovered their children's eyes as tears of joy filled their own. They were free. And Miriam reached into her satchel, glancing at the women around her. One by one, they found their timbrels and put down their heavy packs. And Miriam raised up her voice in song, and all the women joined her, finding their voices and shaking their timbrels as they danced. Even in moments when we are laid utterly low, when we have no idea what the path ahead holds, when we find it hard to even imagine how things might improve, Miriam can remind us we will have cause to celebrate. Hope means packing your timbrel even when you don't know what the morning will bring, because we will dance again. Right now, when it seems like the world around us is on fire, we must remember to actively look for bright spots and reasons for hope. It can be so hard to do this, and at times we might even worry that it's inappropriate or even disrespectful to do so when so much is wrong. But it is essential. This isn't about a rose-tinted looking on the bright side. This is about gaining perspective and enabling ourselves to hope. I want to share with you what brings me hope right now. I am inspired by the incredible spirit of our Israeli siblings, who are not only serving in reserves and sending their children off to defend the country, but immediately after October 7th, through horrible trauma, they sprang into action with grassroots efforts to support those in need, to provide for each other, to enable life to move forward. That entrepreneurial spirit of Israel, the innovation nation, has been harnessed into efforts that have continued for the more than years since that day, to care for the wounded and the displaced, to provide therapy and medical care, to keep kids in school. Israel may be wounded, but her spirit lives, and Israel will survive and thrive and rebuild. Not only this, but so many Israelis are still determined to work for the cause of peace and coexistence, even as they repeatedly flee to bomb shelters. Coexistence meetings with both Jewish and Palestinian Israelis are still happening, even when everybody is on Zoom as the sirens sound and the rockets fly. Israel itself and Israelis give me so much hope. And while you might expect that the opposite would be true in a time of such overt anti-Semitism and hatred toward Zionists and Israel, right now there is actually an incredible boom in interest in Jewish life. Prior to October 7th, studies showed that 83% of Jewish adults in the US reported middling or low degrees of engagement in Jewish life. Now, after October 7th, an astounding 40% of those folks are showing up in greater ways in Jewish life. This means that roughly 30% of all Jewish adults are seeking greater connection than ever before, and the surge of interest and engagement is happening across all age demographics. We're seeing this in our own community. We've had wonderful new folks joining our congregation. We have longtime members deepening their learning and engagement like never before. And we also have more individuals studying for conversion to Judaism with us than ever before. We might have worried that fear and concern over Israel and anti-Semitism would keep people away from engagement, but it fills me with such hope that the opposite is true. Right now, Dafka, right now, we are engaging, we are coming together, and we will not be deterred from proudly living Jewish life because it is a gift and a blessing to be Jewish and to create Jewish joy together. I want to suggest another way to hold on to hope even in these toughest times, and that is to shift our perspective by taking the very long view, taking a historical, generational view. We can become so focused on the difficulty of this exact moment that we can lose sight of the incredible progress that led us here. We can't forget how very far we have come. This past winter, Rabbi David Wolpe was asked during a panel discussion, "What gives you hope?" And he responded in this way: "What gives me hope is I imagine myself in conversation with my great-great-great-grandfather. And I say to him, 'Ugh, it's terrible what I'm seeing at Harvard.' And he says, 'Wait, Jews are at Harvard?' And I say, 'Yes, but there's a lot of anti-Israel sentiment there.' And he says, 'Wait, there's an Israel?' And I say, 'You know what? Yeah, you're right. We have problems, but to our great-great-great-grandparents, we are very, very blessed. We do have problems. We have so far to go. Israel is at war and anti-Semitism is before our eyes. But look how far we have come. The arc of our moral universe is at times so long, it is hard to comprehend. But it is bending toward wholeness and healing, step by faltering step. From a generational view, we have come so far, and we are so blessed, even now. Remembering how far we've come and holding fast to hope, even when our hearts are broken, will enable us to stay the course, to keep doing what we were placed on this earth to do, to heal what is fractured, to work for justice, to move this troubled world of ours toward wholeness and peace. In times like these, it's natural to feel defeated, thinking, I am just one person, and these problems are so intransigent. What effect could I really have? How can I possibly make a difference? In answer to this, I want to share a story that impacted me deeply when I re-encountered it this summer. There once was a small Jewish town. It was far off the main roads of the land, but it had all the necessary institutions: a mikveh, a cemetery, a hospital, a court of law, as well as all sorts of craftsmen: tailors, shoemakers, carpenters, masons. One trade, however, was lacking. There was no watchmaker. No watchmaker. And over the course of years, many of the clocks became so annoyingly inaccurate that their owners decided just to let them run down and ignore them altogether. There were others, however, who maintained that as long as the clocks ran, they should not be abandoned. So they wound their clocks day after day, though they knew that they were not accurate. One day, finally, the news spread through the town that a watchmaker had arrived, and everyone rushed to him with their clocks. But the only ones he could repair were those that had been kept running. The abandoned clocks had grown too rusty. In order to create the world that should be, we must keep winding our clocks, bit by bit, day after day, through the calm and through the storm. We have to keep moving the gears of hope. Our actions do matter, and when we add them all together, they can and do make an impact on the world, even if we can't see the palpable effect, even when it's hard to believe in their power, perhaps especially then. In December of 1897, just a few months after he convened the first Zionist Congress in Basel, Theodor Herzl kindled Hanukkah candles for the very first time in his entire life. He was inspired by the growing light night after night during Hanukkah, and he wrote, "The occasion became a parable for the enkindling of a whole nation. First one candle. It is still dark and the solitary light looks gloomy. Then it finds a companion, and another, and yet another. The darkness must retreat. When all the candles are ablaze, everyone must stop in amazement and rejoice at what has been wrought." We can be the spark that ignites into great flames of hope, not just in the Jewish world, but for all people. That is the meaning of our call to be a light unto the nations. As the poet Amanda Gorman wrote, "There is always light if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it." We sing in our beloved Israeli national anthem, "V'lo abda tikvatenu, ha-tikva bat shnot alpaim." We have not abandoned our hope, the hope of 2,000 years, to be a free people in our own land. We will continue to hold fast to our tikva, our thread of hope, weaving our strands together into a strong, woven scarlet rope, the hope that not only will Israel continue to exist, but that it will thrive, not only that we will survive, but that we as a Jewish people will flourish in a world that embraces and celebrates difference, rather than reacting with hatred and fear. When we conclude a book of Torah, we say the words, "Chazak, chazak, v'nit chazek." Be strong, and let us strengthen one another. At the end of his incredible book, Choosing Hope, Rabbi David Arno suggests a prayer inspired by those words. Kaveh, kaveh, v'nit kaveh. Hope, hope, and we will build one another's hope. So this is my prayer for us as we enter the year 5785. Afal pichen, despite it all, no matter how dark the day, no matter the fear in our hearts, let us hold on to the thread. Kaveh, kaveh, v'nit kaveh. Hope, hope, and let us build each other up in hope together. Amen.